Well, hello and welcome to today's show. Today we have an interesting thing. It wasn't by design, but most of the stuff you see here is not in original boxes. Some of it may be, some of it may not be. This is a Jonsplus Z series. It's a Z20. It's a small case that we're going to put that old birthing person board, that's 9.6 by 9.6, whatever it is, that 4-holer in this box. Well, not this box is paper, but what's in this box is a case, and we're going to put that stuff in here. Now, if you've never done a tight case before, whether it be a small form factor or this reduced size case, or even one of the nicer, slightly larger intermediate cases like the one that Dan and Leanne Lee work together in, that's a nice case too. It's a little bit bigger than this one is right here, and we'll get this out and we'll start the build. Now, what's unique about these small cases are the tighter the case, the more things have to go in a certain order, or you don't get them in and you have to just take other stuff back out. So I do recommend reading the instructions on this. It's like, for instance, we have to pull the bracket off the front side of it, take that off to get the power supply thing out. Before we mount the power supply, we got to put the birthing person board in, and they have a little shelf thing for the top fans, and I think you have to take part of that bracket off out front first to get that slide out tray out. Now, we only have one of our fans. I am using an Arctic fan that you can see me talk about that in a previous video, which is already released, and there's another video coming where I have to work out how exactly to fit an Assassin, a Peerless Assassin 120 double cooler in a very tight case. So that gives you some of the idea. Now, it's a bigger case, it's like a mid-tower, but it's a darn small mid-tower case. So anyway, we're going to open this up, get the stuff out, and you'll get to start seeing how the case looks. Now, it's out of the box. I managed to do that without any help. Looks like it has a glass front, thumb screws on the front. We have thumb screws on the back. The power supply goes in the front, and we do have a C-type and an old-fashioned USB connection in the front. It's black, and we have one button. I don't see a reset button for it, and the power supply power comes in this end above where we have our built-in I/O. We have a few slots down here. This should be for the micro ATX. Now, we haven't done this before. It's going to be a learning experience. We do have a cable that comes from this connector in the back that we put the power cord in that will top in on top of the power supply. I don't see any way to actually operate that power switch, so we better turn it on before we button it all up. Again, we'll have to take the front off, the bracket off, slide the power supply out, I think, according to the instruction, which are most likely in the accessory box that we have right here. Now, the front glass panel comes off just taking the thumb screws off, and it has little rubber bushings that fit over some stobs. But this, we take the screws out, we have to take it and slide it backwards to take the back panel off. Now, the first thing, once we get the sides off, what we have to do is we have 3 screws at the top, 1 screw at the bottom. We have to take this straight piece, this strut out. And then I believe I'll spin it around to show you, or put a still up here, but there are 2 large diameter flathead fasteners in the rear on that power supply bracket. I think we can just loosen those, and they have slots. So I think that we can actually slide it in that slot to a spot that has some big holes and pull the bracket out without taking the screws out. Now, this also functions as the front support for the power supply bracket. Let me get these screws up before I forget them. If you're doing something like that, it never hurts to have some of the little Jello cups that we can put our little fasteners in, remind us where they came from. And if we spin it around, you see we've got 2 little screws.
All right, let me see if I can help you make sense out of this, because the instructions are very unclear to my satisfaction. There's a set of slots, vertical slots going up and down. They have different little round holes that will hold these rubber bushings on the big head screws that you do not remove. Now, they're just little wide spots in the road, so you can kind of push it up into any of these set positions and it will hold it there. What you do if you want to remove it, there's one set of holes that are bigger than the other, so you slide that down till it hits that spot and pull it out. But before you do that, it's held in place by 2 smaller screws, and those 2 smaller screws go in each one of those positions. There is a fairly complicated chart in there to help you fit in either your GPU or your AIO with the size of power supply that you have. And you want to look at that pretty intently based upon how big your GPU is and your power supply, because it's going to determine where you want to mount that bracket once you attach it to your power supply and bring it back into the unit. Then push those two little small screws to hold it in that specific space. Then you take the what do they call it? It's a bracket. They call it a baffle. Then you put the baffle back on only after you get the top fans mounted or AIO mounted, because you have to have that out to get to that one last little screw hidden behind that baffle.
Flathead, they're large diameter right in this area. We'll loosen those up, and I believe we can drop that down, pull that right out. Let's see. Now we have some retaining screws, 2 more retaining screws labeled R2. Yes, the power supply is loose. I've got it tied up with some wires. I'll need to cut some wire ties in here, but we can pull that out. Well, that was very pleasant. It worked well, except that when you put the torch on it, so you can see what you're doing, all black cases are nice for that feature, that they do hide any untidiness in there. But upon close examination, it wasn't a wire tie, it was just a twist tie. And it did. These guys came out just fine. This is the power supply mounting bracket. And it looks like we have room for a larger board. Well, the instructions are a little more pictures and a little less words, but it does look like we need to remove 1 thumb screw and 2 very small Phillips heads in the back, kind of center of the case, and 1 in this top corner. I don't know that you need to watch me do that. I'll show you the results. Now, one of the things that's nice about using a black case is the little screws show up well in your cups, your little cups. Now they should. This is the bracket for the fans, or an AIO if you have one of those. It comes right out as well. Now they have a nice little bit of kit, a little basket with our various screws. These are labeled screw A, which is what we're going to need to mount this down. It does turn out that the standoffs are already supplied in the case screwed in, so we'll be using those already in place. Now we have our little end shield, which we'll go ahead and try to put in from the outside.
A few moments later.
Now the pictograph, the instructions do show putting the power connection to the front, which will put the fan to the front as well. I don't like the fact that the cables are going to be coming from the front rather than the back, but that's the way they say to do it. And we take our little bracket and the power supply goes up in it like this and are secured by 4 A screws. Now I have no intentions of putting a cooler in this, because the old Gen 7 i7 7700 locked processor that's in this birthing person board doesn't get that hot. It's only 65 watts, and I'm going to handle it, I believe, with 3 fans and a cooler. You'll notice that I didn't put the cooler on now. I see a lot of people online, they'll go ahead and mount their cooler and they'll stick it in, but I really want to be able to get in here and get things wired and put into place, routed, before I try to put the cooler on, because I have plenty of access in the back and in the front, so that shouldn't be a problem. Now I've mounted the bracket on here. Now these 2 big fat screws will go through the big holes in the back. There's 1 large set and the rest of them are small. And then they have them labeled P1 and P2. They show you where they go. And I think I'm going to go ahead and put it into P2 position, even though I'm not going to have a cooler, just in case I decide to have one in the future. I don't want to have to, rewrite, re-wire tie and neaten things up, as it were.
Now I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. This is going to run a little bit longer. I want to focus on the case itself and what a nice little build it is, rather than plugging in power supply cables, attaching the fans to the tray, and pasting a air cooler on a CPU. So you might see a few things kind of accelerate from here out.
We're down to mounting the SATA, a little 2.5, and this bracket is the T bracket, and it's mounted with 2 B screws. Now you see there's a little stud right there. It's a little embossed, and then there's one right below it. They're not on the other side, just on this one side.
A few moments later.
And we'll stick our little, I wire tied these in to kind of tidy them up a little bit. But it gives us a nice little thing here. And we are just about done with this portion. Oh, missed the hole. There we go. That's what the back side of the case looks like. We also have some wire ties up here where we took the power cables over. Now, I don't know if you can see this close up, but we've got our power supply, our main. The cooler will go here. I want this to be directly across from the cooler. I'm going to take the bottom fan and push it over here where the hard drive. Well, we've had some parts come in. We're still shy our splitter in the back, but we do have a board here for the Wi-Fi. It's supposed to be a 6E tri-band. We have 2 antennae, and we do have a power cable of some sort, or communication cable to the USB. We have the USB connection in this front corner, and we'll just use this PCIe by 1, I believe it is, to go in there. We start by removing a thumb screw so that we can slide, 2 thumb screws. It's hard to see that black, which is why we like it. This comes out, and we take out that first slot. We've got it seated in there properly. We just tighten down this particular screw. We put our plate back. Use our 2 thumb screws, and it just slides over some little pieces there. We'll add our antenna, and we'll plug that USB into the motherboard. Birthing person board. Well, we're just about done. I do have the 3 splitter. I really only needed 2 if I want to keep just the two fans, 1 intake, 1 exhaust, from the bottom to the top. But that would give 2 exhaust, 1 intake. And if I use a 3 splitter, I'll have a spare in the back side here that I can use if I want to add a second intake fan, so that I have 4 identical fans. What do you think? Let's get a close-up of this and be done. Well, we have it done. I think let's look at this little back channel right here, get a little closer. Handheld, I'm sorry about that. But we see that's a little tight. But we do have room in there, I think, to get some additional cables if you wanted ARGB. Now we look at the drive and how we've got the back tidied up as best I can. We'll flip it over and look at the other side. I've changed the exposure on this. Hopefully this will show, but you see down here in this corner there's a lot of cables because this power supply is not modular. It'd be a great place to have one. Because there are 3 extra cables, a Molex, a PCIe, and an extra SATA cable. Now we see on the bottom we have the 1 fan going for that all work no play kind of look to it. We have the exhaust here and exhaust on the top. Now the top and the bottom intake will be wired together. And of course I have this one from the cooler and the fan wired together so that whenever this ramps up, it takes it straight out. You see the little Wi-Fi card. It's a generic card. It has supposedly an Intel chip. It's not counterfeit. Down there in the bottom you see the USB-C connector. Don't really have a connection for it, but I might put it on a board or something. I'm not using that PCIe slot. Don't feel like I need it for just a single monitor, and that's coming off of the integrated graphics. There is a time and a place for integrated graphics, and this may be it. I just need a little bit of something to see the charts, to see what's going on, and that's about it. We'll put her together. And here we are for the big reveal. Now, if you like ARGB, RGB, that type of thing, or even just old-fashioned LED fans, this may be a very good case for you to use. Now, it is small, compact, and I'm quite proud of it. It worked out really well, with the exception of I just don't have anything to fire that USB-C with this old of a birthing person board. Now we do see that we have this little dotted stuff that if we had a light behind it, you'd see that there's a lot of little black squares in the glass, and that helps hide any of the mess that's behind that power supply and underneath that power supply. Now if you watched it, I should have enough room to mount an AIO if I need it, but this is only a 65 watt processor, and it may run a little slower because we're using the video off of the integrated graphics, which comes off the processor, but it shouldn't be too bad. And if we had to, we could put the 1050 Ti back in. Anyway, it's a nice little case. It's very compact. I think you'll like this better than the Lian Li Dan case. It's certainly stiff. We are about 7 5/8 on the wide. On the length of it, we're 14. Give it 14 5/8 on the steel. We're a little bit further with this to the back. Nice perforated kind of pre-screen filter this way. And on the height of it, let me see if I can do this. Without the rubber feet, it's 11, a little less than 11 3/4. It's a little higher, obviously, if you have the handle up top and, of course, the feet on the bottom.
If you like this content, please go to calldeltosell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you sticking around to after the little commercial bits I have to put in there. You know, the click, like, and subscribe stuff. Now that we're done and we're set with this, I want to thank the ones who stuck with it, even though I didn't show as much detail as they would like. And I appreciate the ones who stuck around who thought I took too much time showing details in there that they didn't need to see. I just can't produce it for everybody. Now, I have a question. And the question is pretty straightforward. Now, I'm not a big fan of lights inside of the PCs, although they are the going thing and have been for a while. The downstairs unit that's now 8 years old that I just didn't intend to replace all the parts in there. I just slowly started upgrading a little bit at a time for the video editing while I build that big one in the Lian Li up there, which is on hold pending Arrow Lake being released and the new Z890 boards. And I wanted a big case for it because I'm going to put an ATX case in there, a big ATX extended case in there, enhanced whatever the E is, the EATX in there. And I need a big case for that because that's, if I connect all my ports up, because, you know, you never can have enough USB ports on your computer. If I max it out, it's going to be a busy little machine. But then I am water cooling it, so water cooling and light do not go together. So I chose black for that. It's all business setup. I've got a lot of fans. I got 7 of the Be Quiets that are the 3 gear size that you can change them. And you can buy a 5-pack of these for less than I paid for a single fan in the big Lian Li case. And it's got 7 in there. Plus the Lian Li's are always expensive. Although, if I looked up the Dan case properly, Dan case is a little bit cheaper than what I paid for this black case. Now my question to you is, and I'd really like to hear your opinion on it, did I do okay, or what would you have thought? Because I considered putting one that had a little bit of the colored accent, the orange and black one, because the roaster there is a rose gold. It's got some kind of that brass gold look to it on a few pieces for accents, but it's black and basically reddish, and the orange is kind of close but not quite, so I don't know how it fit. You never know till you see it in person. It may look like a UT orange thing. Ugh, I can't have that. And then nobody's going to see it anyway. You add to that the fact that I did not plan on building this machine at all. In fact, the only reason I built it, and it was built in a rush out of the scrap parts that I had just taken out of the other one, is because the laptop I was using to run the roaster and the printers up there, the 3 label printers, died. And so I was just in a fix, and I had just spent a bunch of money on the downstairs machine. I've got a bunch more money to go on the upstairs machine, and the one that runs that roaster died. Now I had a backup laptop that I can use, but it's used for a different business, and I'm really not supposed to commingle those things together. But I can if I had to. So my question is, what would you have done? Would you have put some ARGB or some RGB lights in there? I mean, I could have put RGB fans in there, could have put just plain LED fans in there, but to my disappointment, the plain old LED one color fan like is in the downstairs unit, which gives it a little bit of light. You can kind of look in there. It's still kind of dark, but you can see your parts if that's important to you. I did keep up with that when I replaced all those fans. So I don't know. I knew it would be faced away. The glass portion that you would view is facing the wall anyway, and so except for maybe giving a splash of color on the wall, I don't know that I would be giving much to it. And again, these fans, not only are they, I can get 5 for less than what I can get a Be Quiet for, the new Pros that I put in the Lian case, but they also have a minimum speed of 200 RPM. So in most of its life, that computer sits there doing nothing. And I think that's going to help keep the dust down, the dust buildup down on that little machine. And it fits under that table. And that table was a new purchase too, because I didn't really have a place to put a machine under the existing shelves that are there. And that roaster's a booger to get put together and lifted off and moved. And it ain't moving except on that little cart. So that means my new computer needs to be on a cart too. And so I went to Webster store and got yet another stainless table. It's a Chinese table. The 16 gauge was a little bit better. It got the stainless legs, looks a little bit better, but I had to cut the legs off to put the casters on and to shorten it down so it's at the same height as the roaster. And it's just a lot to do in a week or so, week and a half or whatever it took to get it up. Now it did work. It does work fairly well. It runs remarkably cool. It's only got 65 watts in there unless I put the TI in there, the 1050 Ti, and it doesn't really gain me anything because I don't have 2 other monitors run, so why not use the graphics that are built into the chip? And so that's what we're doing. So it's just purely functional at this stage. Now my recommendations, would I recommend this case? Absolutely. In fact, it's a pretty nice case, unlike some of the cheaper cases that have plastic or that very thin layer of wood on top of what looks like it might be either plywood in some cases or even vinyl on another. I think that looks a little bit naff, actually. So it's not, it's just not my thing. What's your thing is what I want to know about. After you see this, would you consider buying this case? Because anytime you go small, it gets to be a bit difficult to get everything you need in there. And of course, this old board, it is paid for, so why not use it? It's out of date, but it works, and it can certainly print serve, and it can certainly run that graphic program I use when roasting. And I did roast successfully. I think I did 3 roasts in maybe 4 or so pounds out of it yesterday, so it works beautifully, responds well. I did have a retail key of 10 that I could put on it because I had to buy that years ago to put on that, upgrade the old laptop, because I declined and waited too long. They wouldn't give me my free upgrade, so I could put that on there. But the hard drive I used was a small one I pulled out of the old machine, and it did not like that machine. Somehow it refused to boot, even though that was the original hard drive that went with that original motherboard and original memory and original processor. It refused to cooperate and gave me you have to rebuild or repair this thing. And so I started to redo it from the ISO, and it got hung up on the, what is that, the network requirement. It wouldn't pass the network, and I don't know how to go in there and pull up to tell it to go ahead and pass it. I think there's a OOBO or whatever command. You can give a command line. You can look that up on there and bypass that. But I just got irritated. I said, well, since it's not going to work anyway, let's just try to see if we can't get Windows 11 on it. And we got Windows 11 on it. Now there's something in the system that it complains that it can't find, because Windows 11 wants that TPM 2.0 chip in there so they can control all your certificates and control what softwares you can and cannot run. And also the newest chips, I've noticed when I was looking at a 14th gen i5, it had 2 other protocols that the 12th gen i7 that I put downstairs doesn't have, and it says it's remote erasure. I'm not real sure why anybody needs remote erasure protocol on their chip their CPU, which obviously works with the chipsets. And this also this new TPM. I'm very suspicious about people telling me that it's for my good, it's for my safety, for my good, when that's the thing that a famous guy in the 30s in Europe would use right before they took over and tried to do a thing. It's not me. So I'm back to roasting coffee, and I got my machine there. There's no lights in it. I'm interested to see if you think it would have been worth it to do that, or if I should have gone with the orange and white, one of the two-tone options. But yeah, I like the case. It's solid. It's heavy metal. There's not plastic in this thing. This thing is a hoss. To me, it looks like a little baby welder, a little baby portable welder, and it fits beautifully under that little table that I had to create. It just was unexpected. So yeah, I like it. I do wish I had a spot on the board that I could run that Type C in the front, because it would be the only Type C I have. But if I use my my 1x to run the Wi-Fi board, I don't really have a spot to place it. And the big PCIe slot that if I don't use the graphics card, I might at some point in the future decide to go with one of those expansion boards and put an M.2 on it and speed up the I/O a little bit. Although I don't know that I needed it, so sufficiently fast for what it's doing, I'm pretty happy. But give me your thoughts. I am truly and genuinely interested in it, because right now the whole world is lighting up their PC cases, and I don't like to do what everybody else does. So I'm going back to black. So that's what I'm doing. All right, appreciate you sticking around, at least for this last half where it's just me chatting, and we'll see you on the next one.